tension you find in your muscle when you contract the muscle, they call it muscle tone. Okay, so you're always kind of on the edge, right? In the sense your muscle is always partially contracted, ready to go. So there is a optimal distance between your actin filaments. Remember the edge band that we tried to close. So if it is overstretched or understretched, then you have some difficulties with muscle contraction. So that's what this length-tension relationship discusses about. If you look at figure 11-12, you can see in the middle, you can see the maximum muscle tone is when you have optimum resting length, the gap in the sarcomere. But if you have overly contracted myofilaments, there's not much room to stretch anymore because you're very close to the Z disc. Or if you overly contracted, if you have overly stretched, then you don't have enough active sites for the myosin heads to bind because it's all the way pulled out. So you have these two extremes which are not ideal. So the middle one is your optimum resting length. Of course, there is a number for that, 2 to 2.25 micrometer, but the concept is more important. The numbers, as always, they are important if you can remember them. But to me, the concept matters more. Then they talk about how a single step of muscle contraction and relaxation works. So if you see figure 11-13, you call it a muscle twitch, but when you think of twitch, you think of the repeated muscle movements like your eyelids twitching and all. But here it refers to, you can see how there is a short latent period. If you see the graph, figure 11-13, and then when the muscle contracts, you can see the muscle tone going up, and then it's dropping. But if you see on the x-axis, the time that you need for the muscle to contract to its maximum is much more than for the muscle to relax. This is a general theme, okay? And there is a point at which the muscle tone starts building up. That's when the muscle starts contracting. They call it the threshold. Threshold is the tipping point or the electric potential, minimum electric potential you need for the muscle to contract. So when you have the inside more negative, what do you call that electric potential?
Polarized?
Yeah, so it's resting membrane potential when it's polarized. When it's depolarized, then when it goes above a certain number, it's plus 35 millivolts. That's what they call threshold level. And anything above that, they call it action potential. So you have resting membrane potential, threshold electric potential, and action potential. Then let's go to the next page. You can see in figure 11-14, you can see the relationship between the electric potential, the summation or recruitment of motor units, and the muscle contraction strength or the muscle tone strength. So you have three things there. On the top, electric potential, and in the middle, you see how many nerve fibers are being brought into action. Remember the motor unit, you have one neuron acting on certain muscle fibers, you call it motor unit, but you can have more motor units acting to make the contraction stronger, or if you have less, you have weaker contraction. So this figure and the description around the figure relates to that. They call it the motor unit recruitment or multiple motor unit summation. You see the word highlighted above. So if you compare, if you look at the voltage, the stimulus voltage, it keeps slowly increasing, and the red line is the threshold value. Okay, and then in the middle, if you see the red dot, it keeps increasing from left to right. That means there is a gradual increase in the number of motor units working on those muscle fibers. And then if you see the corresponding increase in muscle tone in the third figure, in the same figure, the third part, you see the peaks showing up only from step 3, right? 3, 4 and onwards. And then it reaches a maximum level. After that, it doesn't contract anymore. So the point is that you need a minimum electric potential, that is the threshold. Only when it is close or above the threshold value, then you see some muscle contraction. And then after a certain point, it doesn't increase anymore. So there's a direct relationship between the electric potential, the motor units that are going to activate your muscle fibers, and the muscle contraction, strength or tone. Then there are different categories. If you look at the next page, figure 11-15, you have twitch, which is more normal, trophy or tetanus. If you look at the x-axis, you have the stimulus coming at frequent intervals, but the frequency is more consistent in case of the twitch. The interval is equal. But if you see in the other cases, it's getting much shorter, the frequency between two subsequent signals from the neuron to the muscle. Okay. So when you see the twitch, for each signal, you see the action potential going up, meaning the muscle contracts, the peak going up. They use the previous graph you saw, it's the same thing, they show the variations of it. The standard graph is in figure 11-13. But this one shows that the other variations that can occur. So you can see the muscle tension going up, it contracts to the maximum, then it comes down all the way until the next signal arrives, and it keeps doing it. Okay. But in case of trophy, what is happening? It's more or less the same thing. For every signal that comes, you see the muscle contracting and relaxing, but you see the muscle tone, what is happening? It's gradually increasing. You see the peak going up like a staircase. They even sometimes call it a staircase phenomenon, like it's gradually increasing. And this happens to a point. And then in case of the tetanus, in both, you never get a complete relaxation. You see the peak that never comes back to the base. For every signal, one signal before it relaxes, another signal comes and the muscle keeps contracting again and again and again. And complete tetanus is when the muscle stops working. That's when you cannot do anything more. Like at 9 o'clock in the evening when you're in a class, maybe, or maybe even now. Well, then you have isometric and isotonic contraction. What do you mean by the term iso? Equal, okay, isotonic, hypertonic. Here, isotonic, isometric refers to certain types of muscle contraction. You can look at figure 11-16 on the next page. So when you lift something, okay, when I'm lifting my phone or something heavy, I can feel some tension in my muscle even without shortening my muscle. Okay, so metric refers to the length or weight or distance. So isometric, increase in muscle tension without increasing the muscle length, or shortening without shortening. That's isometric contraction. Isotonic contraction, after you lift the weight, when you move, there's no change in the tension, but you change the length. That's isotonic contraction. And depending on which way you move, they call concentric or eccentric. So this all relates to muscle conditioning and training, which you will see in the next couple of pages. So in order for the muscles to function, they work similar to any other cell. They need ATP, the source of energy comes from mitochondria, all of that. But in addition to that, sometimes you make the muscles do more than what it normally does. When you exercise, for example, or when you run, jog, example. Okay, so they have additional systems for ATP production. There are a couple of enzymes that are specific for muscle cells. You can see myokinase and creatine kinase. These enzymes help to produce ATP by other means. And they call it phosphagen system or glycogen lactic acid system, the two systems that are used to produce ATP. So if you see the figure 11, 18, you can see somebody trying to run. Initially, the normal breathing, the aerobic respiration works, normal ATP production works, okay, in the cells, but then with the time, the other systems are used to produce energy until you reach a maximum limit, after which you cannot do that exercise anymore. Then you are forced to breathe in oxygen and everything goes back to the normal state. Then you have fatigue and endurance. Fatigue is when muscles get totally exhausted, meaning you cannot contract the muscle anymore. Some muscles are having long endurance, being able to do the same thing over and over, long period of time. Some muscles have short endurance. So the muscles can be made to have certain types of fibers for long and short endurance. Okay, but they list here some of the factors that affect the muscle fatigue. Potassium accumulation, ADP accumulation, lactic acid accumulation, fuel depletion. So ADP accumulation and fuel depletion are related because you are depleting the fuel ATP, meaning you are breaking it down, you are accumulating ADP, right? Then electrolyte loss, because we need the sodium, potassium, calcium, right? So if you use up everything, then you don't have anything to signal the muscle action. And then other factors that can also affect fatigue in general. Then you need to understand what is maximum oxygen uptake, what is oxygen debt. Even though you can breathe in oxygen a lot, but there is only a certain maximum level one can use. So that's your maximum oxygen uptake. Whereas oxygen debt is the amount of oxygen you normally breathe and the amount of oxygen after you do some heavy exercise. That's your oxygen debt. So if you see oxygen debt, it says difference between the resting rate of oxygen consumption and elevated rate following an exercise. Then I did tell you the muscle fibers can be of different types. So in the following page, they have discussed 3 types of muscle fibers. Some are slow, some are fast, some are intermediate. So you have a lot of differences, as you can see the long list between the fiber types, but the most important thing is this slow fibers. They can sustain a lot of contraction for a long period of time. They act slow, but they are sustainable. Whereas the fast fibers, they act fast and they get fatigued fast. And the intermediate fibers, they have the characteristic of both. They can have more endurance, at the same time they can do some fast actions also. So depending on the training by an expert, you can build those different types of fibers. I don't know how they do that. So depending on the needs, like if you are participating in one activity versus the other, so depending on what kind of athletic program you are trying to do. So the muscle strength and conditioning is impacted by the following factors. First and foremost, how big is your muscle? Not everybody's muscle is the same size, right? Some people work more than the others, depending on what kind of exercise you do or what kind of job you do. Muscles may vary in size. The fascicle arrangement, how the fascicles are arranged. You remember the various shapes like the unipinnate, bipinnate, multipinnate. So some of those arrangements affect the functioning of muscles. Size of active motor units and multiple motor unit summation. So size is how big is your motor unit. What is your motor unit? What do you mean by a motor unit? I said that in the beginning of the class also.
You have one neuron and then you have all
Yeah,
the
one
muscle
neuron
fibers.
and the muscle fibers activated by that neuron is a motor unit. But it could be 5 fibers, 50 fibers, 500,000 fibers. So that's the motor unit size. Okay? And then multiple motor unit summation, meaning how many motor units you are going to involve in that particular action. So that varies depending on what kind of contraction you get. And then temporal summation. We saw earlier the timing between consecutive or subsequent signals that can lead to either therapy, tetanus, or the normal twitch. And length tension relationship, we saw that in the beginning. There has to be an optimal resting length between the actin filaments. And then fatigue, depending on the kind of fibers, your fatigue may be soon or late, whether you have fast fibers or the slow fibers. So these are some of the factors that affect muscle strength. Then you can build your muscles by resistance exercise like lifting weights or endurance exercise like swimming and jogging. In one case, in resistance exercise, the volume increases, but in the other one, you add more components of the muscle fiber or the muscle cell, like more mitochondria and so on. And for the last section, I just want you to look at the differences between the skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscle. Of course, you have lots of differences, but the main thing I want you to focus on, how can you differentiate them based on action, location, appearance, which you have already seen if you are taking the lab. So what are the 3 muscle types?
Skeletal.
Skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. Based on the action, which one is involuntary?
Cardiac and smooth.
Involuntary. This is voluntary. Where would you find skeletal muscles?
In the bones.
Wherever you need to move the bones, not in the bones. Okay? Wherever you need to move the bones or other body parts, right? Like in some cases you move the eyelids, right? Or the lips. Cardiac muscle, obviously, that's a giveaway. And this one, many internal organs. For example, you move your blood, food, urine, your waste, any solid waste, everything, it happens automatically, right? Those are all done by your smooth muscles, like you squeeze
So
the
like your
twig.
intestines would be smooth muscles?
All the structures, yeah, from here all the way down to the exit. All the blood vessels, they all have a layer of, there are many, most of these organs have 1, 2, 3 layers. The middle layer is usually muscular layer, but that varies in the composition and different organs. So those move the blood, food, or even your respiratory tract to keep them open. And what else? Based on appearance, this one is smooth and it has
No stripes. No striations.
no striations. It has a large central nucleus. It looks smooth because it doesn't have the typical arrangement like the skeletal or cardiac, where you have the A band, H band, I band. It's very nicely positioned, so you see those striations. What do you have in the cardiac in addition to the striations? Intercalated discs. intercalated discs. In skeletal muscle, they are cylindrical, they are one above the other, each fiber. You will see the striations. In the cardiac, you will see some branching of the fibers, and you see these dark lines which represent the intercalated disc in addition to the striations. And cardiac muscles, the skeletal muscles, they need the nerve signal for it to start the action or contraction, right? Acetylcholine has to be released, and you have to do all those 18 steps to contract and relax, the steps we saw in the previous class. But in case of the smooth muscle and the cardiac muscle, it has its own mechanism to start the signal because it has to do it without you telling it, right? But there are branches of the nervous system that come into picture when you have to slow down or speed up, like your heart starts pumping more or less, your blood pressure is more or less, then it has to be brought to a normal numbers, then you have some additional role for the nervous system, which we will discuss when we do the nervous system. And they have given some muscle disorders towards the end, like there's one hereditary disease or disorder, which is the muscular dystrophy. And then you have an autoimmune disease where the antibodies of your body start attacking some of the muscle tissue. That's myasthenia gravis. That's where you have the drooping eyelid syndrome, like you cannot hold the, it could be any muscle, but in this case, it's the eyelid that you cannot keep it open for a long time. Okay, coming to your exam, I want you to focus on everything, not just insertion, action, origin. That's going to be part of the test. There could be 2 questions, 20 questions, 10 questions, I don't know yet. And like the way I tried to explain you, there are some muscles that are more obvious than the other muscles, so I cannot list the muscles, but I will be as fair as can be possible, but provided you put your time and effort, okay? Because I did ask you to read it for your own needs, not just for the test. Because if you don't want to read, this could become a drop test, right? I don't want that to happen. Okay, I don't want to sit and read if I have to drop the test. That's why I made the midterm a must from this semester. I used to drop always the midterm, the students mess up, and then it becomes a drop test. Your effort and my time goes waste. So every test is equally important, because who knows, you may do better, right? So try to focus on all the information from 10 through 11. Okay, we started off with the basic muscle structure, how it's arranged inside, and what are the different types of connective tissue, what is agonist, antagonist, synergist, what is origin, insertion, how do you name the muscles, on what basis, based on the direction of the fibers or the shape and so on, and then know the major muscles, where is what, whether it's in the front, back, which group, which muscle belongs. So if you know that, then you can relate to the action, insertion, and origin for at least half of the muscles on those lists. Some, the deeper muscles, they are harder, but there I expect you to know something that I did explain, some information, okay? Like either something it does, or where you find it, or which part it moves, okay? And what else? For chapter 11, you need to thoroughly understand the 18 steps, how muscle works, okay? And then before that, you need to understand the structures inside the muscle fiber, okay? All these subdivisions. You have the muscle, within that you have the muscle fibers, and inside the muscle fiber, that's discussed in chapter 11, you have myofibrils and myofilaments, which are your actin resin, tropomycin, troponin, and how they are organized and how they work all the way through those 18 steps. And then what is motor unit, what is the synapse, what are the structures involved in a synapse, and then whatever we discussed today. Yes, Zachary?
Just to make sure, joints, chapter 9 is going to be on the discuss.
9 we did, I believe.
All right.
But you never know, maybe in the final.
All right. So it's 10 and 11.
10 and 11.
All right.
Just because of the action, insertion, origin. Otherwise, I could have added 12. Okay. So, and the other reason is I want to give some of the students a chance because November 6th is your chance for 2 things. Right? One is in case if you decide to withdraw, if you are not doing well for some other reasons or whatever reasons, and also that's the day when you go to the polls. Hopefully you do go. Okay. I was there watching some of the people in the line. I hardly see anybody below 25. I don't know why. Okay. If you guys are eligible, you should go and invest some time because it's going to impact everyone, including everyone here and us. So if you have a chance to do that, do it, please.